This is part 3 of the testimonies. It didn't upload, so I'm going back to look at my notes to re-upload this. So the Holy Spirit wanted me to also tell you that everything in the Spirit has a smell to it, whether it's diseases, witchcraft spirits, warlock spirits, or demons. There are different types. I'm not going to go through the different types unless he tells me to go through the different types, but I wanted to mention that. Even when I was out in the world, the Lord always sent prophets to me to speak what he wanted to speak to me and to tell me certain things. He always let me know that he was there. And one day when I went to this church, there was a prophetess that came to the church. I was talking fast on the other videos because they had been cutting off or didn't want to store or whatever. So one day I went to a church and there was a prophetess in the church, and she said, the Lord said that if you come to him now, he wants you to come to the altar, that he'll do this and that for you. And when she said that to me, it scared me. And I didn't go to the front of the church that day. I just sat there because I wasn't ready to go to the altar. And I waited till I went home. And when I went home, I prayed to the Lord and I began talking to him and said, Lord, I want to be honest with you. I'm in this world right now and I'm living my life and I'm not ready to come out yet. And the Lord never left me. I was honest and I stayed in that world. After then, about 5 or 6 more years or 7 more years. Um, but the Lord always was there for me. And at the time, when he told me to come in, I also want to mention this. There was a general that I learned years later that was about to go home with the Lord back in the 90s. He dealt with the demonic. And this is the same general that the Holy Spirit told me to go watch his videos and everything. His name was Win Worley. I'm not sure if anyone ever heard of Win Worley before. So I began to listen to his videos, and the Lord began to discuss certain things with me. And I had never ever heard of this man before, but he wanted me to come in so he could raise me up. But that's what was happening there. And let me go back over these notes so I can get this out. There's another time that I was in a relationship with someone. They got into cocaine use and they were doing cocaine. And I thought they were actually cheating. I didn't know that they were meeting someone to get drugs to do cocaine. So we at the time we had separate places that we lived in. And I went over there and they were doing cocaine. And I didn't know I knew what cocaine was, but I had never tried drugs like that before or anything. I didn't do drugs. So she asked me, she said, did you, have you ever done this before? And I lied and told her yes. And I lied and told her yes. And then she, told me, she's like, here, you can try this. So that was the first time I tried cocaine. But to fast forward it, I ended up ODing. And one night when I was in there, and I heard, and I called on the name of the Lord, and the Lord showed up, and instantly He delivered me. I never desired cocaine again. I never wanted to do it again. And all this time that I had OD'd and I was laying there, she was laying there asleep, and while I was laying on the floor, just going out like that. But God was always there. That was even after I said what I said about me wanting to still be in the world. He was still there with me and for me. And the other testimony that he wanted me to give, he wanted me to let you know and make it clear that I was in that life with women for 15 years. And each person I dealt with were the next one, each one of them had an assignment. It was the last one that was meant to try to take me out and destroy me, but God. And the first one, the relationship was very, very toxic. Um, there was always fighting, um, all kinds of stuff going on. She was constantly going to jail. I went to jail one time, and the Lord, I sat there in jail for a couple of days, but then the Lord saw to it that I get out, and I didn't get any charges. Um, it stuck for that, so I'm thankful to God for that. And after then, I dealt with someone else. The first one was about 3.5 years. The other one was 7 years, and the second one I thought was better than the first one. I noticed that I could never progress. I could never do anything. I could never start the business I was wanted to start. I could never just do anything that I wanted to do when it came to progressing. I noticed that a lot, and there were so many other things. Um, she would constantly tell me that Satan was talking to her about me, telling her different stuff about me, and then it was always her dream to get married. So she wanted to get married and have this fantasy wedding and do this and do that. And so what I started doing is I was planning it, and I paid for everything. And when I paid for everything, through it all, I hid everything. And I would hide everything, and because I didn't want my mother to know, because I knew my mother was saved, delivered, and set free, and that she was going to do whatever she could to make sure it didn't happen. So what, what happened was my mother ended up finding out. She prayed against it. She went to God against it. And he came to me, and he told me, he said, "You're not going to marry this person." He said, "You need to call it off now." And I called it off. I canceled everything, the venues, everything. I went and got my money back. The person was hurt, and it was just what it was. He said no, and regardless of the life I was living, I was going to always honor what he said. So, um, so that's what happened in that situation. And then when I went to um, about 2012, I went to Texas because I was seeking the Lord, and I went to Texas. The Lord made it so someone had paid for my flight and everything, my room and board, everything out there and back. So I was in a hotel room and I was seeking God, and so many things happened during that time. That's another testimony that I'll share. Um, I went out there and I was seeking God, and he told me that we pretty much communicated during that time. Then another time I went back to Texas, but it wasn't when I was seeking God. It was because someone wanted me to come there, and I had been there that first time, but this time I went and I was at someone's house. During the time I was at that person's house, the Lord had already showed me that person in a dream, and I didn't understand what he was showing me at the time in the dream, but then he made it all clear. I was there for about 2 months that time, and during that time, there was so much that occurred. Um, there was a woman; she stayed there with her children, and there was a man, which was her boyfriend, and me and her had a sexual relationship or whatever. Well, what happened was when I got ready to leave, she didn't want me to leave. I saw things that I just couldn't believe, and I just really saw her for who she was. She would get upset. Her demons would begin to, um, curse me out, taunt me, just jump on me and all kinds of stuff. When I say jump on me, I mean hit me. She would hit me whenever I would praise and worship. She hated anything that had to do with God. And it just totally different than the person that I thought I knew. And so when I left there, she didn't want me to leave. So what she did was she took my phone, she took my laptop computer. I had an Apple computer. She took it so I couldn't do anything, and basically just tried to leave me with nothing. So I had her drop me off at I was in Crawley, Texas. I had to take the way to Arlington, Texas, to drop me off to a hotel. I wanted to be as far away from her house as possible. So I got dropped off at an extended stay there. So I went in, and what she did was she paid for a night and was like, stay there. And she brought with her a loaf of bread and some peanut butter, and she threw it in the room on the floor, like here. And so I actually, when she left and pulled off, I left that room, went up to the front office, and I told them what was going on. And they gave me another room. They assigned me another room and close to the office. And so when she came back looking for me, I wasn't there. She tried to go to the front office, and they didn't tell her anything because it was like they were protecting me. Well, and then after that night, I just paid for the days that I was going to be there, and until I left. And I didn't know anyone out there. I didn't know anything. And I was walking one day trying to look for a place so I can get food or get some drinks or whatever. And this lady, she said, "Excuse me, ma'am." She said, "I know this is going to sound weird." She said, "But the Lord is telling me to give you a ride wherever you need to go." She said, "I'm not trying to kidnap you." She said, "My name is Deidre." She said, "I'm not trying to kidnap you, and I'm not trying to do anything to you." She said, "He just told me to help you." So I would like to help you. Um, so after thinking a minute, I got in the car and she took me to the store and everything. And she said, "Anything else that you need while you're here, you make sure that you you let me know." And she told me what room she was in. I told her everything I was going through, and she's like, "I was in a situation before. We had a heart to heart talk, but so." I stayed there about another couple of days. I called the airlines, and there was a flight, but it was canceled, so I couldn't catch that flight. So what I did was I had to wait a couple more days. And during the time that I had to wait, I went to the airport to book my flight. I went there. She took me there. And so I went, I booked my flight there. And when I went there was a man there, and he had other people with him. So what happened was he came to me and he said, "The Holy Spirit wants to speak with you." And he began to speak some things to me about my life. And then it was that in that moment that the Holy Spirit let me know what ministry that God would be using me in. And he said, "I had to bring you full circle." And there were so many things that were revealed to me, but one of the things also was a test that he was putting before me. The guy who was prophesying to me, he also let me know many other things about a relationship I was dealing with, and why God did certain things that he did. Um, so what happened was I ended up, the guy said, "If you need anything, call me while you're here." So and then he said, um, I guess the guy who prophesied to me, he had other people with him, and those other people, he said that they traveled and preached the gospel. I guess they preached the gospel, made money off of it, and then they gave him a portion of it. I didn't know that at the time, so I called him at the hotel room, and I was telling him thank you for everything. Um, so so the next thing he tried to convince me to go on the road with them and preach with them, because see, the Lord had already told him, prophesied at the time that I would be traveling and teaching. I didn't know what I would be teaching or what, and what people really, they really want to hear what I had to say and request me. So this man, he pretty much was trying to get me to come on to try to make money off me, and I said no, and I told him don't call me again. I cut all contact with him. So I stayed there until it was time for me to go. When my time was up there, I caught my flight and I went back home. I went back home without a phone, without my laptop and everything, because of course it was taken from me. So that's my testimony on that. I don't want to make it too long because they seem to be cutting off, but I'll continue to the next one, and then after then I'll go to something else, whatever the Holy Spirit wants me to go to. And God bless you all.